With the permission of Chair, Ambassador Azaz Ahmed Chaudhry, Director General Institute of Strategic Islamabad, may we start, sir? And same like from the Myanmar side. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, most kind, most merciful. Chairman, Myanmar Institute of Strategic and International Studies, Director General, Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad, Chairman, Board of Governors, Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad, fellow colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, and good afternoon to friends in Myanmar. I am Dr. Saif Malik, Director, India Study Center at Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad. On behalf of Ambassador Azaz Ahmed Chaudhry, Director General ISSI, I warmly welcome you all to this August forum. Ambassador Chaudhry will chair the dialogue from Pakistan side, while his counterpart in Myanmar will be the co-chair. Today's strategic virtual dialogue, titled Challenges to Peace and Security in South Asia, is quite significant in view of the prevailing geopolitical and geostrategic environment of South Asia. South Asia is home to well over 1/5 of the world's population, making it the most populous, rather the most densely populated geographical region in the world. This region of the world is also home to a diverse group of global challenges and conflicts. The region is also of great significance due to its strategic, political, social, and economic outlook. The security of this region is directly connected with the security of other regions of the world. This region has unique characteristics with the interplay of economic, diplomatic, and security factors that portray the complex picture of the whole region. In the recent year, the emergent regional dynamics of South Asia have made it more significant at the global level. This is primarily because of the complexity of the conflict between India and its neighbors, which poses threat to international security in general and regional security in particular. At the same time, the economic potential which South Asia offers in this form of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, commonly known as CPEC, coupled with China-Myanmar Economic Corridor under China's BRI initiative, and India's relevance as a big market holds immense significance. Unfortunately, the overall security calculus of the region is very much affected by India's aggressiveness towards neighboring countries. Ladies and gentlemen, the Institute of Strategic Studies Islamabad, commonly known as ISSI, and Myanmar Institute of Strategic and International Studies, generally known as MISIS, aim to analyze the current geopolitical and geostrategic environment of South Asia and how Pakistan and Myanmar could play their role to promote peace in the region. The dialogue will also look into the current standoff between India and China and how it has impacted the strategic calculus of South Asia. Therefore, it is imperative for nations of South Asia to stay engaged through regular dialogue with a view to bring together understanding and harmony. Ladies and gentlemen, may I mention especially for viewers that we will hold a brief question and answer session as well to benefit the presence of the worthy speaker. Please text your question in the message box and mention the panelist for response. With this premise, prior to request Ambassador Azaz Ahmed Chaudhry, Director General, Institute of Strategic Islamabad, for the welcome remarks, let me briefly introduce him. Ambassador Chaudhry has served as member of Foreign Service of Pakistan for 37 years and Foreign Secretary of Pakistan over 3 years. His last diplomatic assignment was as Ambassador of Pakistan to United States of America. Ambassador Chaudhry holds a Master's in International Relations. He also authored a book, Pakistan, Mirror to Dutch Eyes. Ambassador Chaudhry, floor is with you, sir.
Thank you, very much, Dr. Saif. What a pleasure this is for the Institute of Strategic Studies to speak to Myanmar Institute of Strategic and International Studies, MESIS. I am particularly pleased to co-chair this panel discussion with Ambassador U Nguyen Man Chien, who is the chairman of Myanmar Institute. This is the first kind of dialogue between Pakistan's Institute of Strategic Studies and Myanmar Institute of Strategic and International Studies. We are also pleased that the technology made it possible for our two institutes to get in touch with each other and not wait until you travel to Pakistan or we travel to Myanmar. Let me also express our welcome and pleasure at the other participants who will be joining this dialogue. From Myanmar side, Dr. Daw Hin Mamamyo and Mr. U. K. Mint. And from Pakistan side, Dr. Farhan Siddiqui and Dr. Shabana Fayyaz. The program requires us to have two themes. One theme is Indo-Pacific, the dynamics in Indo-Pacific, on which we will give you our perspective, Pakistan's perspective, and we will hear Myanmar perspective. Then we will have the second topic, which is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and China-Myanmar Economic Corridor. We look forward to very fruitful discussion. Let me share with you my very initial brief comments on how we in Pakistan are looking at the world. We can see, and I am sure that you can also see, that the world we had known is changing rapidly. There are now multiple centers of power which have come up and are exerting pressure for a new balance of power, especially in Asia. The most conspicuous feature of today's world is the emerging competition between United States and China. And we have seen that United States has identified Indo-Pacific region, the region of Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean, to be the main arena where this competition will unfold. We also see that United States has chosen India as a strategic partner, and therefore there is considerable tension within South Asia about the implications of United States-China competition. Alongside, there is another phenomena which is of worry to us in Asia, but also rest of the world. We can see a trend in major parts of the world towards unilateralism. there are leaders emerging in various countries which want to impose their own will on other countries using their own political and economic and military power. This has undermined globalism or globalization or multilateralism. So there is a tussle between unilateralism and multilateralism, which will also affect many parts of the world, including Pakistan and Myanmar. There are huge challenges of peace and security, as well as economic distress that has come to our world in the wake of COVID pandemic. The two major trends are that United States would like to continue to maintain its global dominance and leadership, and the Chinese model is to reach out and build economic stakes in different parts of the world. The Chinese like to call it as their way of globalism or win-win option for all countries. It is in this regard that China-Pakistan economic corridor has become important for Pakistan. Pakistan has also had relations with the United States, and we would not like to see a conflict between US and China in our part of the world. I would like to stress that during discussion today, these two topics, Indo-Pacific strategy and the economic corridors of both Pakistan and Myanmar, will help us understand each other's perspective better. With these welcome remarks, I hand over the floor back to our moderator, Dr. Saif Malik.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Chaudhary, for your welcome remarks and overall understanding of the region and indicating the drivers of power in the contemporary arena. For the opening remarks, I am privileged to invite the co-chair of today's dialogue, Ambassador Yu Nguyen Maung Shin, Chairman of the Myanmar Institute of Strategic and International Studies. Ambassador Shin has served the government of Myanmar for 40 years before retiring as ambassador and permanent representative to United Nations in Geneva in 2008. He held various diplomatic positions at Myanmar missions in Bern, Hanoi, Bangkok, Dhaka, and Tokyo. He holds Masters of International Public Policy from the Johns Hopkins University, Washington, D.C. He received several medals from the government for his services, the highest being the Excellent Performance in Administration Medal, first class, awarded to him in year 2000. Ambassador, the floor is with you now.
Thank you, Dr. Saif. Excellencies, Ambassador Aziz Ahmad Chowdhury, Director General of ISSI, Ambassador Khalid Mahmood, Chairman, BOG ISSI, Dr. Saif Malik, Director of the Indian Studies Center, distinguished colleagues from Pakistan and Myanmar. First of all, on behalf of MISIS, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our friends from Pakistan to this bilateral virtual meeting between the two institutes. Before I begin my remarks, allow me to introduce to you the members of my delegation. Of course, we have Ambassador Nguyen Nguyen. He is the vice chair of this institute, and he will be making the concluding, summing up. Then we have two colleagues, as you mentioned, Professor Dr. Kemama Myo and U Jin Yen from our institute. Indeed, I take much pleasure for this opportunity to speak a few words on Pakistan-Myanmar relations in general and relations between our two institutes in particular. After gaining independence from British colonial rule, our two countries enjoy close and cordial relations. There had been regular exchanges of visits at the state level in the earlier days of our independence. The boundary in the Nab River sector between the then East Pakistan and Burma was demarcated into a fixed boundary, thereby eliminating the dispute of the boundary line, which had been until then fluctuating frequently. There have also been exchanges of visits between the top levels of the armed forces of the two countries, including the staff college exchanges. The most recent state visit was that of the Pakistani President, Mr. Asif Ali Zardari, to Naypyidaw in 2012. His visit was followed by the then Prime Minister, Mr. Nawaz Sharif, in 2013. In 2016, the Speaker of the Upper House of Pakistan, Mr. Mian Raza Rabbani, came to Naypyidaw to observe the first session of the parliamentary proceedings. Such high-level visits play an important role in the enhancement of our bilateral ties. The foreign offices of the two countries had also established the FOC, which already met twice. The third meeting is overdue, and both sides should work on the holding of the dialogue at an early date. Myanmar and Pakistan need to explore the abundant opportunities for cooperation to our mutual benefit in the political, trade, and social areas. Both countries are strategically located between India and China, which very well define our important role in the security of the South Asia region. Now let me turn to the relations between our two institutions. MISS, as far as I already know, we had an MOU with ISSI when our institute was under the military government, but it has long expired. Under that MOU, we had exchanged visits and held talks on a regular basis. However, since the inception of the transition government of U Tai Singh, we lost contact with your esteemed institution. So today we are very glad to revive our relations and look forward to further cooperation, including the signing of a new MOU as we constituted in 2013 under the U Tai Singh government. We now have full independence from government control. Although we would like to meet you in person, as you said, Mr. Chairman, earlier, either here in Yangon or Islamabad, because of the pandemic, we are confined today to this virtual meeting. We hope that when the situation improves and stabilizes, we would have the opportunity to meet face to face. As agreed upon by both sides, today we would like to exchange views on the Indo-Pacific from our national perspectives respectively, and on the BRI, in particular, the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor and the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. I also wish the meeting every success, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Shin, for your opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, our first speaker is Professor Dr. Farhan Hanif Siddiqui, who will enlighten us on the topic, Pakistan's perspective on Indo-Pacific. Dr. Farhan Hanif Siddiqui is Associate Professor and Director in the School of Politics and International Relations at Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. Prior to this, he was based in Department of IR at University of Karachi. In addition, he has also worked as Research Fellow at the Middle East Research Institute in Erbil, the Kurdistan region of Iraq. His research focuses on nationalism, ethnicity, conflict resolution, theories of international relations, foreign policy, and strategic dynamics in South Asia. He is author of The Politics of Ethnicity in Pakistan. His forthcoming book is titled Introducing International Relations, Concepts, Theories, and Practice. Dr. Farhan Siddiqui.
Thank you, Dr. Saif, for the very warm introduction. And also thank you for inviting me to the webinar today. And I'm also thankful to Ambassador Chaudhry, and also a very warm greetings to our colleagues in Myanmar. My topic today is basically to speak on the Pakistani perspective on the Indo-Pacific, and what I'll do in the next 10 minutes is to speak about this Indo-Pacific strategy report that came out last year by the US Department of Defense, and then I'll speak about Pakistan specifically in terms of the challenges that Pakistan faces going into the future, especially in the context of this rivalry that is seemingly growing between the US and China, and visibly a new world order is being shaped. So let me begin first with the Indo-Pacific strategy report from last year, just point out what I think are the key points and conceptualize, in fact theorize of where the arguments are basically coming from when it comes to the US. So the salient features of this Indo-Pacific strategy report primarily is that it sees China as a revisionist power. And this is a key change from the Obama presidency, when China was, of course, not termed this way. And also it speaks of a rule-based order, which the US leads and which it wants to protect to the benefit of all nations. And the entire text of this report, it engages in what we call as an othering of China. So within strategic studies, you also have an emphasis on how ethnocentrism is embedded into strategic texts or reports or any analytical report for that matter. And ethnocentrism within strategic studies, which is one of the highlighting features of this Indo-Pacific strategy report, can merely be understood very simply as a phenomena, as a socio-psychological phenomena in which societies, states or nations, they see themselves as the center of the universe, and they perceive and interpret other societies which are different to them as through their own frames of reference, and they judge others as inferior. And what these ethnocentric frameworks do is that they provide very simple binaries of good and evil and right and wrong, with us always the good and the right, and the other side always the evil and a party which is on the wrong side of the debate. So this Indo-Pacific strategy report, and I just point out some highlighters where these binaries are created, where this ethnocentricity is manifest, is it represents a very simple choice between a free world order and a repressive world order vision. The text again is very clear and explicit in its branding of China as a revisionist power. Russia is seen as a revitalized malign actor. North Korea is seen as a rogue actor. The text says that the US pursues partnership within the region, which is the Indo-Pacific region, but China, on the other hand, seeks domination. The US wants to trade and benefit all states. China practices or pursues predatory economics. Also makes a distinction between the Chinese people and the Chinese state, which is again very alarming in the sense that the Chinese people are supposedly aspiring for free markets and justice and the rule of law, but the state works contrary to it. The report again says that China seeks regional hegemony, and the ultimate goal is, of course, global preeminence, and that coercive behavior of China is playing out globally from Middle East and Africa to Latin America and Europe. So these are the ethnocentricities which are manifest in the report. And of course, this ethnocentricity does not play out in reality. So if you look at the reality of how politics in the region works out, and we've positioned China at the center of this analytical framework, we find, again, ironically, that China is a major trading partner of all the Quad states. including US, India, Japan, and Australia. China-US trade amounts to almost 650, $700 billion. And again, if I go to theory, theory tells me that when two states are economically interdependent or engaged with each other through economic ties, uh, it is not easy for them to break those ties out in a very simplistic manner. And of course, this economic interdependence and the fact that both sides benefit, and in fact, the entire region trades with China, it is not easy for them to break out of these trade interactions and simply put a strategic rivalry framework in place. So this entire strategy for the Indo-Pacific, it is still very at its incipient stage, number one. Number two, it is creating these binaries, but the reality of the region as it stands today, it's very different to how the region works, to how the Americans, for example, are seeing the region and its dynamic unfolding. So this turn towards unilateralism that Ambassador Azaz Chaudhry spoke about, this is especially worrying, but this is worrying on the part of the US. It's not in the case of China, because it still wants to engage not only the region, but the entire world as part of its BRI strategy. So where does it leave Pakistan, and what is it that Pakistan should do, and what is the Pakistani perspective? So I'll basically raise a number of questions, and then I'll try and answer those questions. And again, it's about highlighting the Pakistani perspective, but it is also highlighting the challenges that we face going into the future, especially in the context of a US-China, if a polarized world emerges in the future. So the questions that I pose are, how, why, and what ways should Pakistan be concerned about a rising Indo-Pacific strategy that excludes it? And it presents what is this othering or revisionist risk. And again, if you go to the report, it makes clear that the US will rely only on 5 partners, which are India, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Bangladesh, and Nepal. And that this Indo-Pacific region, it runs from the western coast of the US to the western coast of India, and this is where the buck stops. So again, Pakistan's strategic priorities or preferences, what are they and what should they be? And what is Pakistan's core interest moving forward? Again, in the context of a rising Indo-Pacific conflict dynamics. Is it geopolitical security? Or is it geo-economic prosperity in the sense of maximizing initiatives? And of course, Pakistan is also left with a strategic dilemma if a polarized world emerges of choosing sides, US or China. So the question again is, should it choose sides? And if it should choose sides, why should it choose sides, or why should not it choose sides? So the answer to the questions that I raised, there are multifarious, but I'll go through them very quickly. So Pakistan, as it does today, and what it intends to do into the future is exactly this, that it focuses and it needs to focus on the grays of international politics and refuse the blacks and whites that are offered by way of the strategic report. So, the strategists, they evoke fear, they evoke threats, as this report is doing. But again, Pakistan tends to work on a different trajectory, avoiding these ethnocentric frameworks and not seeing one pole of power as essentially good than the other. And of course, the most important priority for Pakistan going into the future is that it places most important on its economic security. So the optimal strategy for Pakistan, a strategy that it is pursuing now, and a strategy that it intends to pursue in the future, and rightly so, is an autonomous foreign policy based on its national interest, which cherishes support for peace and stability in South Asia, also peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. And it is focused and should be focused entirely, if not exclusively, on non-traditional security imperatives. So again, the point is not to choose sides. So if it sides with the US, so the dangers are, if it sides with the US, there is opportunity for moving closer to the East Asian states if a very strong binary framework of alliances emerges in the future, but then it tends to isolate its traditional friendship and partnership with China. If it sides with China completely, then it risks alienating the US, because the US still controls and dominates the international financial institutions. And for that, Pakistan needs that strategic and even an economic partnership with the US. So with CPEC, as is the case, I think CPEC, it provides a wonderful opportunity for Pakistan in the sense that it tends to seek economic gains not only from China, but there is also a multiplier effect. So in the past 4-5 years, we've had interest for trade and investments, not only from China, but also from Germany, France, South Korea, and at one point of time, even Egypt showed interest in, and you can include Saudi Arabia as well. And even Egypt at one time expressed interest in investing for trade and business, being part of this CPEC strategy. So this multiplier effect of CPEC in the sense that it attracts other countries towards Pakistan is something of a very important benefit to how Pakistan sees itself going into the future. And recently, the Prime Minister constituted an economic outreach coordination group with Dr. Mueed Yusuf as the chairman of this group. And it is tasked exactly with this, that is developing and coordinating our domestic synergies and pursuing comparative advantages with trading states, which can be potential for Pakistan in the longer run. So this is how Pakistan sees itself. This is how Pakistan tends to move forward in the sense that it is better off with what in theory again is called as a hedging strategy, which is a strategy that falls between a pure balancing and a pure bandwagoning approach. It is premised on the lines of economic pragmatism. It is based on binding engagement with any of the blocks or any of the polarities that emerges in international politics if it were to emerge, let's say, into the future. And again, it seeks a policy of dominance denial in the sense that it wants to work with all major powers out there because the national interest of Pakistan again reigns supreme. So just to conclude very quickly, Pakistan cannot do much about the Indo-Pacific region as it takes the shape of a great power rivalry between the US and China because it's coming from an anarchic international system. There's a distribution, there's a major redistribution of capabilities taking place. And there are elements that Pakistan cannot control, nor can it do anything about the weaponized interdependence that is now at play between the US and China in terms of sanctions and all. But what it can control is to mediate these systemic pressures by engaging in a hedging strategy, again, not which is far removed from a pure bandwagoning or a pure balancing approach that maximizes its quest for economic security by leveraging its relationship with both the US and China to its advantage. This is what I have to say about the topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Siddiqui, for a very comprehensive overview of the region in question and also raising some very thought-provoking questions. Our next speaker is from MISIS, Professor Dr. Daw Khin Mayo, who will share her thoughts on Myanmar's perspective on Indo-Pacific. Dr. Mayo is a professor of international relations at University of Yangon, Myanmar. After the new democratic government took office in May 2011, she served as assistant director at the president's office. She rejoined the university in 2013. She also teaches at the Civil Services Academy, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Union Government Office, and Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She did PhD in International Relations from University of Yangon. Her research interests include regionalism, peace, security, and bilateral relations of Myanmar. With this brief introduction, may I request ma'am to please, floor is with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to express my appreciation to the two institutes for organizing this virtual dialogue. I'm truly honored for having a chance to talk this afternoon. I'm going to talk about Myanmar's perspective on Indo-Pacific. I intend to explore Myanmar's role and perspective on Indo-Pacific amid the current geopolitical and geostrategic environment. So let me introduce first with the Indo-Pacific concept and region. Asia is one of the world's most economically and politically dynamic regions. Despite territorial and historical tensions, regional power competition, nuclear crisis, and human security threat, the region has maintained relatively peaceful and stable since 1945. However, great power rivalry and international politics impose huge implications on its regional politics. The rising China and US Asia people policy overshadows strategic environment of Asia. In recent decades, China's Belt and Road Initiative led by President Xi and President Trump's American First policy brought about implications entirely on the region and regional states. Especially states with geostrategic importance have experienced huge impact whenever power relations change in international and regional relations. Meanwhile, the rivalry between the United States and China in the Pacific and Sino-Indian competition in the Indian Ocean shape strategic calculations. The distinct rivalries and interaction between them seems to reflect undeniably on geopolitics of the region. So, against the backdrop of relatively weakening of United States' dominant position and increasing shift to geopolitical and economic gravity to the Indo-Pacific, the American aim is to reshape alliances and partnerships to respond to China's rise. The US has put forward the Indo-Pacific strategy, and objectives of President Trump on the Indo-Pacific strategy is the expansion and revision of Asia-Pacific rebalancing strategy and to contain China's rise. In June 2018, the US renamed its Pacific Command as Indo-Pacific Command that indicated its schedule for strategic approach in Indo-Pacific. Changes in the geopolitical environment in the Asia-Pacific region are the fundamental causes motivating the creation of Indo-Pacific strategy. The concept in the Indo-Pacific has emerged from an evolving mental map of the increasingly contiguous Indian and Pacific Ocean, as well as the growing economic interdependence of states within the region. An Indo-Pacific concept is actually seen as divisive for various Asian countries. So, as a member of ASEAN, Myanmar also has considered the responses of Southeast Asia countries to the Indo-Pacific strategy, which is diverse. To link the Indian Ocean with Pacific Ocean, Southeast Asia became a key area that cannot be bypassed. Indonesia and Singapore are also supporters of the Indo-Pacific strategy concepts. And small countries which geographically and economically linked with China are cautious regional order changes while maintaining relations with China. So as the Indo-Pacific region navigates through uncharted waters in the US-China rivalry, strategic small states in the ringland in Asia, which border with both powerful states and have choke points in war commercial sea lanes, are very crucial for hegemonic objectives of great powers. Both Myanmar and Pakistan are definitely in the position of geostrategic states in Indo-Pacific region and the strategy. So let me talk about Myanmar's role. So Myanmar role in Indo-Pacific, Myanmar is a very important country in terms of geostrategic and geographic factor in Asia. The country was strategic for hegemonic power in Asia in the past, stay essential for the ambitions of great power rivalry in Asia, particularly Indo-Pacific in the contemporary regional politics. So there are 5 factors why Myanmar play a key role in Indo-Pacific. The first factor is strategic location. As we all know, Myanmar is located at crossroads of East and West. Geographically, it is a gateway between East Asia and South Asia. It borders with giant India, China, and the ASEAN countries. Its access to Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean is crucial. It is necessary for the backdoor of southern states of China and development of 7 states of southwest India. So it is one of the states, a strategic center of gravity in the Indo-Pacific region. Second factor is its natural resources. Its reserves of energy resources, emerging consumers, useful labor force, and fertile land are valuable assets of prosperity. So country could provide raw material and market for external economic partners. The third factor is the hub of communication and transportation. Myanmar stands as the natural leverage between transport and trade networks of China and ASEAN on the one hand, and those of South Asia on the other hand. The country is naturally linked to be a transportation and logistics center for the region. It has smooth access to neighboring countries in ASEAN Highway, Asian Highway, BIMSTEC Highway, Tripartite Highways, Caledon multimodal transit transport, and bilateral highways with neighboring countries. Deep sea port would be effective for war commercial sealing and maritime trade routes. And also railways are trying to upgrade wide new Museo Chao-Tu railways, Museo Mandalay railways, and Singapore Kunming rail link, and Southern Corridor Trans-Asia railways network are constructed. So it has links with Indo-China Peninsula Corridor, GMS Economic Corridor, East-West Economic Corridor. Another factor is maritime strategic ports. Myanmar linked with the hands of geopolitical destiny, Indian and Pacific Ocean. Its deep sea port would be potential spots for commercial and naval strategy. And its maritime strategy is located in the Bay of Bengal, near choke point on Indian Ocean sea lanes and became a key area that cannot be bypassed by all great powers in Indo-Pacific. So the fifth factor is its participation in regional and sub-regional organizations in the region. It is a member of ASEAN and affiliated institution. The country is an observer of SAARC and also actively participated in BIMSTEC, ACMEC, and Lanchan-Mekong Cooperation and others. So these above 5 factors prove that Myanmar is of strategic importance in Indo-Pacific. Both the United States and China consider that it is important in the regional geostrategic environment. And the US shared vision, a free and open Indo-Pacific report stated that Mekong region, including Myanmar, is strategically important in the mainland Southeast Asia. So China is also a strategic partner of Myanmar, while it has been the largest trading partner, major investor and donor. It is diplomatically supported in the international community. So it is also a major facilitator for domestic peace process in Myanmar. And also the policy of non-interference in domestic affairs of other countries has been a crucial factor in shaping the special relationship between China and Myanmar. But Myanmar has facing various challenges and issues while it is in the process of democratic transition. It could not risk its national interest by mingling in the crossfire of great power rivalry in the existing international relations. So how Myanmar as a strategic state should respond in Indo-Pacific? So Indo-Pacific is a debatable idea the US and its allies are responding along the Indo-Pacific strategy. So US-China rivalry visible in the current regional politics. Whether like it or not, Myanmar as a pivotal country in the region has no choice but engage with delicate balance. As a small power and sandwich between China and India, it is important to balance itself with pragmatic engagement and diplomacy. Actually, such kind of policy is not new for Myanmar. Since independence in 1948, Myanmar adopted independent and non-aligned foreign policy. International politics were characterized with power struggle between East and West bloc. Myanmar was willing to avoid East-West tensions since both favored the country for its valuable strategic location. Hence, it practiced non-alignment policy since then in 1954. The country adhered 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. So the current NLD government stated that an independent, non-aligned, and active foreign policy direction, dealing closely with neighbors and nations of the world. The basic principles since 1948 are the same. Besides, the approach to international issue is based on sincerity, goodwill, and genuine friendship. So through the United States, China, Indian-China regional rivalry in the future, the Indo-Pacific region is likely to be characterized more by competition than cooperation. Myanmar needs to strictly keep its non-aligned policy towards both the US and China. It is essential to use wise diplomacy and balancing response for its own stability and interests. And when we look at the US-Myanmar relation, the relationship was improved since 2011 due to the outcome of changing geopolitics and Myanmar domestic politics. and Myanmar could reintegrate international community and diverse diplomatic ties as democratic and independent state and reduce over-reliance on China. And also the relationship is very important for the economic recovery of Myanmar. At the same time, Myanmar continue to maintain the powerful fraternal relationship with China as its strategic partner, a giant neighbor, a major economic supporter. It is necessary to have cordial relations with China. At the same time, its approach steadily leads to balancing diplomacy, which enable Myanmar to opt for a chance balance for its external relation, and sometimes even mild hedging with China. And also as a member of ASEAN, Myanmar has engaged regional cooperation in Indo-Pacific along with their ASEAN norms and engagement. So let me conclude with some perspective from Myanmar. Myanmar seeks to manage insecurity and ambiguity, maintain relations with a major power, and work toward balancing various external influences. The non-alignment policy actually serves as Myanmar's long-held foreign policy, which calls for balancing internal factors while managing external relations independently. Moreover, the country should engage actively and positively more with regional countries which are in the same position. So these strategic countries with delicate position in Indo-Pacific share experience, learn each other, and cooperate for regional peace and stability. So both Myanmar and Pakistan, we can have a cooperate closely, share experiences working together for peace in South Asia and Asia as a whole, more than ever in the Indo-Pacific. So nevertheless, in the current regional politics of Indo-Pacific, Myanmar is essential to practice its independent, non-aligned and active foreign policy firmly that will benefit from maintaining a delicate balance in its external relations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mayo, for highlighting some very crucial factors which matter a lot for this region. Now, our next speaker is Dr. Shabana Fayaz, who will focus on the theme China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, Harbinger of Regional Connectivity. Dr. Shabana Fayaz, with more than 2 decades of teaching experience at the Defense and Strategic Studies Department, Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. Dr. Shabana has contributed greatly to the field of terrorism, violent extremism, and non-traditional security threats. She did doctorate from the University of Birmingham and currently serving as chairperson at Department of Defense and Strategic Studies, Islamabad. Additionally, she is on the board of Payman Alumni Trust and Pakistan House. She is also an alumni of the Women and Security Program at Harvard Kennedy School. With this, I request Dr. Shabana for her thoughts.
Assalamu alaikum and hello everybody. It's a great pleasure to be a part of this learning dialogue. This is my first time, I must confess, to be in interaction with such a renowned and seasoned people from Myanmar. I've traveled around the world, but never had an opportunity to meet and engage the highly esteemed scholars that I am having today. So as the ground has already been set by our worthy ambassador, Azaz Chaudhry Sahab, and the counterpart in MSIS in Myanmar, that world is going a great change, is undergoing a great change, and it is a more globalized and networked world. So the big question today is how and what options the Pakistan has for itself and how Pakistan can contribute to this fast-paced changing world. Now coming to the CPEC, CPEC is actually one of the flagship projects of BRI, and BRI is an overarching project, a vision translated into action by People's Republic of China that aims at shared growth and prosperity across the continents. Myanmar, as has been pointed out by my worthy fellows from the institutes in Myanmar, is also a part of that, and so does many other countries. Now, the big question I would like to pose is that how and the Pakistan can and is contributed to the regional connectivity in this session. Regional connectivity in Pakistan's perspective, implies economic and shared prosperity. It is built on interconnected world and interconnection with the other powers, the states of the world through the enhanced road, rail, and sea networks, and also the air corridors to be set up under that. Now, what is CPEC all about? It is a matter of great concern for the big powers. I will come to that in later on, specifically India, emerging power, and the United States. But let's see what are the contours of CPEC now. CPEC is basically, it is aimed at the development of geographical linkages, having improved road, rail, and air transport system, and activity of higher volume of flow of trade and businesses. And the aim is that it will result in interconnected, integrated regions of shared destiny. Pakistan aim of being the part of originator of CPEC is twofold. One is to bring its infrastructure, economy, development, and prosperity to a great extent and home. Second is to be a major transit route because of its geographical proximity, sitting 3 regions across the world. Pakistan being a neighbor of Afghanistan, being a neighbor of India, being a neighbor of Iran, having the deep and historic connections and levels connections with GCCE, Gulf countries, and also the other Middle Eastern countries, wants to reach out to the world and invites the other countries of the world to be a part of this system. As has been pointed out by earlier scholars, that Pakistan has in fact extended, so does the China, invitation to India to come on board. But we will discuss what reservations with India has, and will India be a counterpart of CPEC in the long run, or what it can benefit from that. The projects under the BRI flagship project of the CPEC range from infrastructural development of our country, of modern transportation networks, energy projects, powerhouses, and the special economic zones. This one is a very important parameter in Pakistan's overall CPEC implementation phase. We have completed the phase 1, where the roads have been set up, Gwadar port has been upgraded, and it is the deep sea port at Gwadar has started being functional with the help of Chinese. Now, the important part is the major second phase is the special economic zones that are spread across in Punjab, one of the major provinces, in Balochistan, and the Sindh and KPK as well. This is a phase that is a testing ground for the implementation of CPEC. As has already been pointed out by my predecessor, that the special joint commission has been set up with the China to undertake to look at what are the roadblocks in the implementation and how to have a smooth recovery on that projects. So this is that. And then important is another important element, that the CPEC is not only about industrial infrastructural development. There is a big misperception around the world, even within our country and the region, that it will only benefit the industrial output of the state. This is not so. The one of the corner part of the CPEC is to look into the agricultural potential of Pakistan. As Pakistan is a major agro-based country, we earn the maximum revenue from that. So the vision is, with the help of China, we will be undertaking collaborative projects in this sector. This is a phase that the people of, especially the farmers of Pakistan, are looking forward, and the steps are already underway, but of course there are challenges accompanying that vision. Another important part of the CPEC is that some of the countries of the world, specifically the external, I don't want to do the labeling, they call it as a debt trap projects. And in fact, the whole BRI is seen, perceived by some actors as the external actors as the debt trap diplomacy. Now, the point is, that how and why the countries take the debt, the big question is that we all belong to the developing world. The fact is that we do not have economic resources to emerge without the help of industrial and major developed powers of the world. So that is why, as has been pointed out by Professor Farhan Siddiqui, that Pakistan has not the option to choose white and black. We have the option, that is the option to choose between the gray lines. And this is where our potential for diplomats and the industrialists and the policymaker is how to make the best for the country and contribute to the regional connectivity to the maximum. Now, this brings me to the point that how and why the Pakistan can contribute to regional connectivity. Let's take the Central Asian republics first. We all know Central Asia is a landlocked part of the world. Now, Pakistan, China, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan have back in 90s signed a traffic in transit project. But because of the differences of the regimes, because of the geostrategic compulsions, that has not materialized. Now, it has been reinvigorated, and it is hoped that through the CPEC, Pakistan will be able to give access to the landlocked part of Kars and also to the Afghanistan. Coming to Afghanistan, we all know Afghanistan is a war-torn country. There is no stable government there, although the governments have already been in place, but the question of having an economic security is a big challenge for Afghanistan. Chinese, on their part, are heavily investing in Afghanistan. They have become a major trade partner of Afghans, and the Pakistan-China-Afghan are willing and perceiving the way how to use the CPEC projects, specifically giving another access to the Afghanistan that is also a landlocked countries. And now another important part is the GCC. It is perceived on one end that we all know China is dependent on energy supplies from the Gulf countries. Now, through Gwadar and through the road links and the transportation part of the CPEC that Pakistan is providing, it will be easy for China to use that route to get the supplies in minimum period. So that will apply to the other cars, and that also opens an opportunity for cars, Central Asian republics, to supply their gases and their energy supplies to other parts of the world through the Gwadar and the CPEC related projects. And in that, obviously, the India will benefit a lot. And that is something that Pakistan and the world, and of course, is trying to register with India, how they can benefit from this opportunity. Now, why India is not on board on CPEC, and why? As has been pointed out by the preceding, my predecessor speakers, India is one of the major rising economy of the world after China. And it wants to be, it perceives a superpower role in the Indian Ocean region. That, of course, is challenged by other state actors. Now, India is also having a strategic partnership with US, and US has identified India as one of the major strategic partners in this part of the world, and various reports have come out from the USA in that regard. So how there is interesting part is that India, China are also neighbors. But at the same time, they have the border dispute, but they also have very vibrant economic relationship going on. So it is a relationship of competition and cooperation going hand in hand. What Pakistan can do through CPEC is, and that's what Pakistan has been advocating and pursuing, is that we can offer India a route to the Central Asian republics and a route to the Afghanistan, and similarly a route to the GCC. And that will be a less cost route available to India. Now, important stumbling block here is the intensity of negative relationship between India and Pakistan. It is a known fact that because of tensions between the two countries, I'm not saying who is right and who is wrong, But the fact is that the region has suffered, and both countries have suffered, and people of the countries have suffered and will continue to suffer, because you have the lopsided development, and less is spent. We need to spend more and focus on economic infrastructure. So, China has extended an official invitation to India in the past as well. So let's hope, it is also hoped that after some time, the India may come out because of its own needs and interest to join in the club of the CPEC. But that is a far-fetched idea. I would like to conclude that CPEC is part of the flagship project of the BRI, and it provides a very favorable route of regional connectivity and resultantly enhanced economic cooperation, as well as widespread people-to-people linkages in the region encompassing South, West, and Central Asia. In a nutshell, connectivity through CPEC will help in three main sectors, that is regional economic growth defined by trade, energy, and tourism. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Shabana, for highlighting various contours of the project, also highlighting the potential beneficiaries of the region, also along with the, highlighting the significance of the project for India as well. With this, now I invite our last speaker, Mr. Yu Kui Muin, to dilate on Belt and Road Initiative with China-Myanmar Economic Corridor. Mr. Muin graduated from the Rangoon Arts and Science University and joined the Myanmar Foreign Service in 1972. While working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Myanmar, he served in various capacities in departments of Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well as in the Myanmar missions abroad. He retired from the Foreign Service in December 2006 as Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He retired from the membership of MISIS in 2014, but working as Senior Research Fellow at the MISIS since 2015. Sir, floor is with you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First of all, I'd like to say Inglaba, or good afternoon to all the distinguished participants from Pakistan, ISSI. Today I'm talking about China-Myanmar Economic Corridor, BRI and China-Myanmar Economic Corridor. I think my presentation will focus mostly on security aspects, as I was asked by my chairman. In my presentation, I have divided four parts. The first one is the introduction. The second part is the BRI projects in Myanmar, and the third one is Myanmar perspective, and the last one is the strategic implications. So these are the parts I am going to discuss today with my presentation. As you are aware, Myanmar is situated between Southeast Asia and South Asia, as well as between China and India, encompassing some 125 countries. The BRI aspires to improve the economic prospects and potential stability for more than 2/3 of the world's population. Even before China-Myanmar Economic CMEC was agreed, we have been participating in the BRI. So some of the projects in Myanmar that has been carried out as part of CMEC is in fact well underway even before CMEC was undertaken. When Myanmar was invited to join the BRI and China-Myanmar Economic Corridor, we felt that joining the CMEC would definitely pave the way for the country's economic development and prosperity, and for achieving a durable peace that would help to speed up the establishment of the federal democratic state in Myanmar that its people have been longing for. As you are aware, again, our country has been in civil war since we regained independence in 1948. So we want to end this internal conflicts once and for all. And this is one of the reasons that we want to join BRI. If we join BRI, we hope that there will be a prosperity in our country. And when there is prosperity, economic development, internal conflict will also cease in the country. Especially China could also, we feel that China as an immediate neighbor could help us, could help Myanmar to end the conflicts in the country. It is later found out that China is already become very important in the negotiation for ceasefire in the country. When we look at BRI, the focal point of BRI is, as stated by our colleagues, infrastructural connectivity. The only part left for the BRI to materialize is in Southeast Asia region. Myanmar people sincerely believe that that country occupies a strategic position in terms of geopolitics. Myanmar is located on the southern tip of Indochina Peninsula, and it possesses an important strategic location on the banks of the Indian Ocean and Bay of Bengal. Myanmar is also located on the Maritime Silk Road, or the 21st century Maritime Silk Road, South Belt. Myanmar's aim in the BRI is to invest and foster collaboration in Southeast Asia and to widen the trading access. The government of Myanmar has announced in May 2018 agreement for the establishment of the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor as sort of China's One Belt, One Road initiative. On 6 July 2018, Myanmar announced that China and Myanmar have agreed a 15-point memorandum of understanding on building a China-Myanmar Economic Corridor. The corridor will run from China's Yunnan province to Mandalay in central Myanmar, and then east to Yangon and west to the Chaoju Special Economic Zone. Now I will discuss about BRI's CMEC project. One of the BRI projects in Myanmar is oil and gas pipelines from Chaoju to Kunming, which is roughly 1,000 kilometers long. The gas and oil pipelines is already started to operate in 2013 and 2007, respectively. As I said, CMEC was signed only in 2018. So this project was started before we have signed CMEC with China. The second project is Chaoju Deep Seaport and Special Economic Zone. This project is of strategic importance in connecting China with the Indian Ocean and is located at the terminus of oil and gas pipelines, bringing fuel to China's landlocked southwestern provinces. The port will also help reduce China's need to ship fuel to the vulnerable Strait of Malacca. The third project is Chaoju Kunming Railway Project. The railway is 868 kilometers long and runs from Myanmar's northern border with southern China down to the central city of Mandalay and eventually to Myanmar's southern coast. An MOU was signed in March 2018 to conduct feasibility studies for the construction of the Mandalay-Musa Expressway project and Chaoju Nebido Highway project. The last project is the border economic cooperation zone that would encompass land on both sides of the two sides border at Musa in northern Myanmar and Ruili, Shuili in southern China. So these are the Myanmar-China China-Myanmar economic corridor projects, which are now being undertaken. However, as I said, the two projects has been already completed and operated. This is about the oil and gas pipelines. Other projects are still in the feasibility study and in the negotiation stage. And now, because of the COVID pandemic, all the projects and they come to a stop for the time being. But we
Thank
can
you very
continue.
much.
Yes.
Please continue. Continue.
Continue. Please continue. Please continue.
So I think maybe the time is up for the presentation. So I will go to Myanmar's perspective. Myanmar's perspective is, although we are sorry to use this term debt trap, in Myanmar, this debt trap is, we are very much concerned, the people are very much concerned with debt trap. Because it has been happened in some other countries, and we hope because we are very close neighbor to China, we didn't want to happen in our country. So the negotiations are made between China and Myanmar authorities, and Myanmar would like to tailor the size of the project to the need for Myanmar. More importantly, the government will not borrow any funds and will not seek any sovereign authority. Myanmar negotiated to seek financing from international financial institutions to implement the projects. To invite international lenders so as to ensure international investment in the project, and to choose the proposed project that would create mutual benefits for both sides. Myanmar will make efforts to see that the CMEC projects serve the strategic interests of both countries when they were undertaken on the basis of equality and mutual benefit. The Myanmar government sincerely believes that participating in the BRI will bring domestic peace, economic development, promotion of trade and investment, strengthen transport infrastructure connectivity, upgrade energy infrastructure facility, and build a network of communications and people contacts with other countries along the BRI routes. We also believe the China-Myanmar economic corridor, in particular the new deep sea port in Jiaoju in the west, will definitely enhance country's position to widen its economic opportunity. And the last is my assessment on the strategic implication we are concerned with regard to the CMEC project. As it is, it could be seen, CMEC projects have been giving China direct access to the Indian Ocean for the first time. 4/5 of the continental traffic between Asia and the rest of the world, and 3/5 of the world's oil supplies pass through the Indian Ocean. Trade represents 60% of China's gross domestic product, and roughly 85% of that trade is seaborne. No other neighboring country can provide China with a secure outlet to the Indian Ocean by passing the contested South China Sea and congested Strait of Malacca, through which most of its fuel imports travel. Yeah, the BRI and its links through Myanmar, if implemented, could soon establish China as the Indian Ocean region's dominant power. China's initiatives in Myanmar are viewed as more focused on geostrategic dominance than commercial or trade interests. It was viewed that China-Myanmar economic corridor, one of the BRI's important components, if implemented, will have far-reaching economic, political, and strategic implications for South and Southeast Asia. However, in the longer term, there is a possibility that China's position in the Indian Ocean are likely to collide with those of existing Indian Ocean power, such as India, Australia, US, and US, which maintains an important military base in Jiku, Russia. Some Myanmar people are of the view that BRI project may guide China's economic and strategic goals in Myanmar. We hope that we could overcome all these obstacles, difficulties when we implement this China-Myanmar economic corridor. Okay, there's one more problem in the west of the country, that is in Rakhine State. There are some conflicts in armed conflicts, military conflicts in Rakhine State, and if this is the first point, and the second point is that all the important oil and gas pipelines and traffic will go through most of the insurgent areas. And if Myanmar cannot get ceasefire agreements with the insurgents in those areas, it will be very difficult for China to implement the CMEC projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for signifying some very strategic dimensions of Myanmar-China economic corridor. Ladies and gentlemen, I once again invite Ambassador Ijaz Ahmed Chaudhry, Director General, Institute of Strategic Studies, to wrap up the proceedings of the dialogue. Ambassador Chaudhry.
Thank you very much. I think we heard some very interesting presentations, but I would first like to acknowledge the welcome address by Ambassador Yu Myung Shin, who also mentioned and recalled the MOU that the two institutions had signed earlier. I think it would be a good idea to renew that memorandum of understanding. We can revise the text, it can be exchanged, and we can sign one copy here and one copy there and exchange by mail for the time being. We will contact you for this purpose later on. We also heard the first speaker, Dr. Farhan Hanif Siddiqui, and the second speaker, Dr. Daw Hin Mama Meo, both about the Indo-Pacific strategy or Indo-Pacific region. Dr. Farhan Siddiqui mentioned that the US-China competition in the Indo-Pacific region needs to be handled carefully because economic prospects cannot be given up by the countries. They need to leverage relations with both US and China to maximize economic security. So this was the good message from Dr. Farhan Siddiqui, and I noted from Dr. Daw Hin Mama Meo, who highlighted Myanmar's strategic location being a hub of connectivity and transport between South Asia and East Asia. And her thrust was also that despite the challenges in the Indo-Pacific region, it would be useful to keep the focus on economic benefits. The other topic on which we talked about was China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and China-Myanmar Economic Corridor. Dr. Shabana Fayaz told us that the CPEC aims and contributes to integrating regional economies and could serve as a good transit hub for all countries, north, south, east, west, and could be a harbinger of prosperity for all. Mr. Yu Ki Min, speaking about China-Myanmar economic corridor, stressed the security aspect. He said that BRI brings prosperity, which then helps end conflict in the country, in Myanmar. But Myanmar is also concerned, he said, about debt trap, and therefore is seeking to tailor the size of CMEC according to the needs of Myanmar. I think these were important lessons that we learned from this dialogue. I would propose that we can take a brief question-answer session. So floor is back to you, Dr. Saif.
Thank you, sir. Now, for interactive session, I have a question that has been raised by one of our research faculty, and any panelist from Myanmar side can address it. Question is, India claims that insurgent groups active in northeastern region have consolidated their positions inside Myanmar. In 2015, India also claimed to have carried out a surgical strike inside Myanmar. What is the Myanmar's take on this issue? Any panelists from Myanmar side?
I will let Ambassador Uwinwe speak on this because he has served as Myanmar's ambassador to India for almost 7 years. So he is our expert on Indian affairs. So I will let him speak on this issue of this surgical strike that you mentioned. Ambassador, please.
Thank you, good Chair. First and foremost, I would like to say that even though I was in India for not only 7 years as an ambassador, but also 3 years as a young officer, a total it comes to about 10 years. But tell you, I'm not from India. That's the first point. If you go through the concept note, in the second paragraph, something has been mistakenly been undemarcated boundary with Myanmar and Bhutan. Myanmar and Bhutan, we've got no boundary or no border with Bhutan. That's the first one. So the question which I've got to answer when it comes to the have been given. We do not have that much insurgents from the Indian side. But we got some Nagas staying with our Nagas, but this has been going on very well, and I had no advance report until now with regard to the insurgency in that particular area. But sometimes there used to be some Minipuris or some Nagas coming over and hit and run, that sort of thing. But it is not a long fighting, but it used to take about 1 or 2 or 3 hours. That much I could answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. One more question. How the cooperation between Pakistan and Myanmar may be further strengthened in the domain of trade and economy, considering their cooperation with China, because the current level of cooperation is not up to the mark as it should be.
Okay.
Yes, this question is again from.
Can you clarify
yes.
your question?
Pardon? Okay, I can repeat the question.
Yes.
how the cooperation between Pakistan and Myanmar be further strengthened in the domain of trade and economy while considering their cooperation with China.
To promote the trade bilateral.
I think both Pakistan and Myanmar has an agro-based economy, and also we have a industry, and also we can have a trade in agro-based industry, and also for Myanmar side, the bean and pulses, and also garment, and also the fisheries products, and something like that. Actually, this is the major item of Myanmar for exports, and also Pakistan can import us for necessary equipments, and also technical, and also the other agri-based products too. Myanmar too. Actually, Myanmar and China, we have a largest trading partner, and we have a lot of various items, including machinery, agriculture exports, and fishery. So I think, in my opinion, both Pakistan and Myanmar can enhance trade items. Both are necessary for these countries. And also we welcome the agro-based products to Myanmar too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mayo. To sum up the discussion carried out by the speakers, may I request again Ambassador Shen, Chairman MISIS, to share his thoughts.
Yes, to share. Okay.
Yes, you please.
This for promoting trade, I think what you said is correct. We have more opportunities to explore, to increase our bilateral trade, because I think one of the areas is the pharmaceuticals, you see. Pakistan produces a lot of pharmaceutical medicines, and right now we are mostly importing them from either India or Bangladesh. I think we can also explore the opportunities of importing pharmaceutical from Pakistan. But for that to happen, I think the chambers of commerce between Myanmar and Pakistan should also be and explore the possibilities, further possibilities. Yeah. Ambassador Wundu wants to add some more.
For times we have got a good trade with Pakistan for years. And as far as I know, we are still continuing with some part of the trade, what Jay has been saying. We've been buying some pharmaceutical products, and one hour ago I have taken 2 tablets, which that was been imported from Pakistan. And in fact, we can share some of the things, something with culture, something with what Dr. Muse said, something with agriculture products. And we have been buying something from Pakistan for years. And the improvement of mechanization of agriculture has been in full swing. And we need to join hands with Pakistan, because Pakistan happens to be agriculture country like this. So we can share experience not only with Pakistan, it is together. I see Pakistan together with China can go together, and it will be very nice for all of us. It will benefit to all the 3 countries if we share not only with culture products, we can exchange, and there are many things which some items which Pakistan has been buying from us, something like betel nuts. Betel has been imported, or betel they have been importing from us, what I know. So there are many items which is beyond my knowledge, but still I can see there are things, many things are open. The only thing is we have got to, and the next point is, that the distance is quite far. The distance is quite far. We have got to go a long way. We make this one like that prosperous. Thank you.
Thank you. At the end, for the concluding remarks, I invite Ambassador Khalid Mahmood, Chairman Board of Governors, ISSI, and Chairman Board of Governors. Ambassador Khalid Mahmood is a former ambassador of Pakistan to Iran, Iraq, China, Saudi Arabia, and Mongolia. He is also a former permanent representative of Pakistan to the Organization of Islamic Conference and the Economic Cooperation Organization. Currently, Ambassador Mahmood is Chairman, Board of Governors at this institute.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I want to express my deep pleasure at this revival of contact between the Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad, and Myanmar Institute of Strategic and International Studies. As Director General ISSI has already stated that our institute will be too happy to formalize a new MOU between our two institutions at the earliest possible. This exchange today has been very useful. We have heard the perspective from Pakistan and Myanmar about the challenges to peace and security in South Asia. Talking of South Asia, as has been already stated, that by virtue of the size of its population, area, resources, human capital, that it should be a highly developed and prosperous region. But reality, unfortunately, is not so. This area, South Asia, is clubbed with developing countries. Many of the least developed countries are found in this region. So there are many challenges. The basic challenge, as I see, is it relates to this binary between peace and development. According to some people, it is the underdevelopment which is the cause of instability and lack of security in this region. According to some, no, it is the lack of security which impedes the progress and development. So it is the famous, chicken and egg situation. But no one can deny that you need minimum security. Or minimum security is a sine qua non for development. And unfortunately, this area has been the theater of various disputes, conflicts, and domestic convulsions also. So, and now in the present scenario, the growing US-China competition, the theater has got enlarged. No longer it is South Asia, but now it gets connected with the situation in the Indo-Pacific, and also is impacted by the policy of unilateralism of the United States. So it means the situation becomes more, it gets aggravated. And you see, peace is affected also by the ideological makeup of the countries and the governments. For example, as we see what's happening in India, that RSS-inspired Hindutva, dominated Modi government, it's causing problems for particularly minorities, not only within India, but also it gets expression in the expansionist policy of India towards its neighbors. And no wonder that India has running disputes with almost all its neighbors. But the silver lining in all this situation is this visionary initiative by China in the form of BRI, of which CPEC and CMEC are the very shining examples. So, what to do? Answer lies to enhance our efforts to promote peace and good neighborliness among the nations of South Asia, and to encourage cooperation, bilateral as well as regional. Unfortunately, as we all know that given the stance which India has taken, the SAARC process has got stuck. It's become dysfunctional. But Myanmar is, of course, linked with ASEAN, which is performing better. So I think we have to revive this SAARC process so that cooperation at the regional level could also prosper. And of course, another thing which is very essential to promote peace and security is to settle disputes. You cannot, gloss over, and these are real problems. And to resolve problems, you have to adopt all peaceful means, negotiations, arbitration, conciliation, judicial settlement, what have you, all have been prescribed by the UN Charter. So we have to employ all these peaceful means to settle our problems. In case of, as you know, with India, we have this major problem of Kashmir, which is hanging fires in 48, and all efforts at peaceful settlement through bilateral means have failed. So maybe there is now need to explore other peaceful means than bilateral negotiations. So I'm not denying the importance of bilateral negotiation, but this is only one of the methods which has been tried, and so far it has not worked. So if it can work, well and good. If not, we should explore other methods of peaceful settlement also. So with this, I would like to conclude by saying that it is in our common interest, it is the recipe for common development that we resolve our disputes and concentrate on the socio-economic cooperation and development for which OBOR, CPEC, CMEC, they provide timely opportunities and eschew big power rivalry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Khalid Mahmood. Prior we close the event, may I also request to our counterpart if they could, we will appreciate if we could get the written script through mail that could be included in the reports. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, I'm grateful to the worthy speakers and panelists both in Myanmar and Pakistan for having spared their very precious time and making this strategic dialogue, which is basically virtual as well, a very success story. Ladies and gentlemen, for press release, reports, and video recording, please keep on visiting our website, www.iissi.org.pk. With this, event stands closed. Thank you, everyone.